Oh, it sure is. The one on the hotel?
Hotel there.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no restaurant there.
Sorry about this.
Excuse me, folks. There's a white truck outside, parked just north of the doors. License plate CSK6862. Your alarm's been going off for a little bit there, okay? It's a white truck with a case sticker. I'd like to welcome everybody here today. My name is Sproule. I am the third of Lloyd's 4 kids. Today we're here to celebrate Lloyd's great life. He lived a big, long life full of farming and stress and family and wild fun and just a little luck. To start things off, we're going to have a prayer from Lloyd's brother Michael.
When I was very young, my brother and I shared the same room together, and one of the things I remembered very distinctly, he was 8 years older than me. His bed was maybe 6 or 8 feet away from mine. Every night, he would sit on his bed for about 15 or 20 minutes, and he'd just plan and think and reason, and I could just tell he was contemplating what was next. And then he'd always, after he was done thinking and planning, when he felt he was finished, he'd always kneel down and say a prayer before he went to bed. And I'd just like to read a psalm, Psalm 61. And if you could bow your head in prayer with me, it is a prayer, and then if you know the Lord's Prayer, just pray along with me after I finish this song. Hear my cry, O God. Attend unto my prayer. From the ends of the earth I will cry out to you. When my heart is overwhelmed, lead me to the rock that is higher than I. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us of our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. God sent his Son. They called him Jesus. He came to love, heal, and forgive. He lived and died to buy my pardon. An empty grave is there to prove my Savior lives. Because he lives, I can face tomorrow. Because he lives, all my fear is gone. Because I know he holds the future, and life is worth the living just because he lives. Then one day I'll cross that river and fight life's final war with pain. And then as death gives way to victory, I'll see the lights of glory, and I'll know he lives. Because he lives, I can face tomorrow. Because he lives, all my fear is gone. Because I know he holds the future. Life is worth living
Winston Sproule moved to beautiful Pincher Creek, Alberta, somewhere around 1949, and into what Isabel's mother, Grandma Maria, would call the dump, just below Tower Hill. Lloyd Winston Sproule rolled off the turnip truck at the LaBelle Mansion in Pincher Creek on July 20th, 1951. After losing their first child, baby girl Shirley, as an infant, Isabel was overjoyed to welcome Lloyd and said that he looked like a prize fighter. As the story goes, a neighbor had to head to the field to tell Winston that Isabel had had a healthy baby boy. A few years later, Donna was born in 53, Connie in 55, and then Michael in 59. Growing up, Donna and Connie would say that Lloyd was their serious and hard-working older brother, and that he was brave, very brave, and full of guts. Michael remembers Lloyd being so clever with machines and mechanics. They were just so natural to him. He built an incredible go-kart at 12 years old, equipped with steering, brakes, a clutch, rubber tires, and a gas motor. It was all steel and every part was welded together by Lloyd himself. He had to borrow a gas motor from Winston's grain auger and put it back when he was done using said go-kart, but not before a neighbor kid got a compound fracture. At about 15 years old, he bought his first street motorcycle, an early 60s Honda 250. After he bought it, he took it apart, restored it, painted it, and reassembled it with the straight exhaust pipes for a nice loud sound. Then he would ride it up and down Main Street, Pincher Creek, doing manies with his leather jacket and sporty helmet on. At about 17 years old, he purchased a 1957 Chevy car. Within a few days, he had cut most of the body off of it and converted it to an incredible hot rod buggy. He had it insured and bombed around town for the summer with open seats and no doors. Then came his first muscle car at the age of 19. It was a 1969-ish shiny blue Chevelle with white racing stripes. It was bought, driven, and cherished by Lloyd, however, owned and insured by Isabel. He loved to squeal its tires on the 507. One day, Lloyd, Connie, and his Grandma Maria drove down the hill to the 507, and Connie's job from the passenger seat was to record on one of those old tape recorders the sound of him doing a burnout. It was a huge success. That cherished old recording still exists today. It used to be in cassette form in his office for many years until just recently he conned somebody into putting it in digital form so he could keep it close by on his iPad. Even in the last year, he was still proud as ever, with gleaming tears in his eyes to play that recording for anyone that would listen. Tires squealing, Connie laughing, Grandma Maria squealing, hanging on tight. We believe this is where his sheer love of doing a burnout started. He's always been well known to want to spin and squeal tires. From his childhood to our childhood, and to the poshest Mastro's parking lots you could find, there was simply nothing as fun as doing a burnout, especially in front of an unsuspecting crowd of people. So, in the early years, the Sproules were very poor. But probably by the mid-60s, Winston had farmed and fed enough cattle that things seemed quite stable. Winston was viewed within the community as successful by about 1970. Winston was very driven. Once Winston had a little money, he bought a brand new outboard engine boat. It was green. The family had zero experience with boats. On the first day of the Waterton Dam, Lloyd at the wheel, water skier in tow, Lloyd landed that boat high on the beach. Some scratches to the boat, but passengers and skiers remained unharmed. Poor Isabel hollered the entire time and was never very comfortable in a boat afterwards. Around the same time, Lloyd graduates high school. Isabel claimed that he couldn't leave fast enough. He worked on the rigs and tried construction jobs, but it only took 6 months and he was back, and he sought out to be a farmer because he loved it. Lloyd and Winston worked tirelessly to build the farm. Lloyd was completely under the watchful apprenticeship of Winston, who again was well experienced, successful, and moderately wealthy by this time. They had a world of respect for each other, worked hand in hand to accomplish their lofty goals, and had coffee at 10 a.m. every single morning. Lloyd's first tractor was an open cab 1030, circa 1964 model-ish. He tells stories of farming Isabel's with it entirely. During seeding, he went over the entire field 3 times in the same 1030 tractor. He seeded it, he fertilized it, and then he rolled it. Dad would say that he would drive it all day and work on it all night. There are stories of him running it out of fuel, going wide open across the field, and how many days it would take for him to get it started again. We still use that tractor on the farm today for smaller tasks, although it isn't for the faint of heart. It makes your ears ring and your hands vibrate long after you get off of it. Speaking of firsts, Michael, coincidentally, was Lloyd's first hired man. Let's call Michael 13 years old. He was bossed by Lloyd, paid by Winston, and still sharing a bedroom. That was until the late 80s, or the early 80s, when Lloyd built the house at the farm as a single man with the help of local experts Joe and Frank. He built it big and well, but fancy it was not. Fancy wasn't really his thing. He liked white t-shirts, blue jeans, and simple things. Rumor has it that that house would become the after-party house. It had 3 upstanding young gentlemen living within it, Lloyd, Andy Warnock, and Beanie Shrimp. I'm not actually privy to all the stories that came out of that era, but what I do know is Beanie, Andy, and Dad all had matching house coats, and they may or may not have had the locks on the outside of the doors. Early in 1983, in what we can only imagine as a whirlwind small-town romance, Lloyd Matt started courting Jackie Lammers. Good sources tell us that Marcel wasn't so happy about this, but like most things, Lloyd was persistent and just smooth enough to eventually wear him down. A little over a year later, they'd be married in August 25th, 1984. The festivities at the farm, which unfortunately meant Andy and Beanie had to move out. Then, in shockingly fast time, they welcomed their firstborn, Vanessa, December that same year. Derek, his golden and favorite child, followed a couple years later at 87. I made my entrance at light speed a year later, and Angie rounded out the bunch in the summer of 91. That makes 4 kids under 6, also known as a pack of wolves, and bad ones. As of this date, there's only 1 diaper change on record. There's a picture of it. Like many dads, tiny kids were not Lloyd's thing, but once we could fish and bike, that certainly changed. We didn't have an extravagant life as kids. The farmhouse still had ugly carpet in the kitchen, and we shared rooms until Lloyd finally added 2 more in the basement of the former party level. And when Angie and Derek went dirt biking, they got to pick between numbers 17 and 71. 1 and 7 were always taken, and those were the 2 numbers Lloyd could easily make out of electrician's tape. He took us on weekend vacations to the Sheraton Hotel in Calgary, where we got to water slide until we were tired, and then we were forced to tour around looking at real estate. One of Lloyd's great loves was touring around. No matter where you were going with him or what you were doing, there always had to be extra time for touring, which inevitably led him to be very late everywhere he went. One time, he made Mom take us to Mount Rushmore on the way by. Not a single girl in that vehicle knew nor cared who was on the side of that mountain. And we broke down while climbing the hill, but hey, at least we can say we've been there. Growing up on the farm was full of hard work and was very busy. It seemed like that's all we did. There was no extracurricular activities or individual sports. Team hockey? Hard no. 6 a.m. on Saturdays was farmers hockey. If you wanted to play hockey, you better get in the Suburban then. 4-H? Ha! He said to Vanessa, you want to learn how to feed cattle? I'll teach you to drive a feed truck. And that he did. And it didn't seem to matter that he had 3 girls. There was no double standards in his mind. He seemed completely oblivious why the 3 of us girls wouldn't be able to do the same jobs as Derek. Now maybe we were a bit more dramatic, took a little longer to learn, but driving machinery or throwing tires, if we were hanging around, we were working. He would famously say to us, and when are you going to do some work around here? Whenever we were not working. And we weren't the only ones working on the farm. Uncle Lloyd was a haven for nieces and nephews that needed a job. Whether it was for summer to go mowing or painting, or for the long term, there was always work to do, and he was happy to pay you for your efforts. Ryan said that he started full-time at 13, with Uncle Lloyd picking him up from school, and he didn't leave until 27. If there was one thing that Lloyd loved more than farming and Crown and Coke, it was his lawn, and Ryan had the privilege of being the lawn tender for many years. Don Havishard started working for Lloyd in the spring of 1996, and there wasn't a single set of books. Not one. But Lloyd seemed to have a gift, his ability to know what things were worth. And machinery, you name it. He knew the market value of everything with alarming accuracy. The smartest people around him would call him especially smart, a borderline mathematician. But that wasn't it. He seemed to always know what to do to get what he wanted. And what he wanted was to be the best farmer ever. He always wanted to be on the cutting edge of everything. He questioned people a lot. He read a lot. And there was nothing he hated more than being average. In business, he was a true capitalist. He thought if you could buy the land, you could do anything you wanted with it. If you didn't like the way somebody did business, buy him out. Other than that, buzz off. He was hardworking and a marvelous mentor and teacher, about as even-keeled as you could get and generous to a fault. He believed in doing every job the right way the first time, and he didn't have time for subpar work. No matter the job at the farm, one of his other famous lines to us and everyone else was, "I know you know, just do it." He was an incredible employer. He was always concerned about their health and welfare, and he wanted to hire locals. He paid them generously and cared about their livelihood. Those that worked hard for him, he really appreciated. He was an excellent example. There wasn't a Sunday that he didn't work because that was everyone else's day off. He pushed hard for a health plan and RSP, which was a large feat for a small operation back then. He was as fair as the day was long, but he didn't like confrontation or the escalation of an argument, and he held his cards really close. Some of his peers observed that at a young age he had a vision for what he wanted to accomplish, and that he moved towards that goal his entire life. He wasn't afraid to have a little fun along the way, but his eye was always on the goal. Those that were a little younger than him watched closely, and at times tried to follow his lead. Even if their focus was in a different direction, watching what Lloyd did still had a ton of influence on those around him. The perspective of those that worked alongside him, his peers and those he mentored, was that a big part of success was timing. And they claimed that Lloyd seemed to do the right thing at the right time, every time. That's interesting to me because the perspective from Lloyd to this often lost middle daughter was the complete opposite. He never thought he did everything right. At some point in my life, I had some big life-altering decision to make, and I was very stressed about it. So naturally, I asked the smartest person I knew, my dad. And this was his advice. No matter where you go or what you do, life is just a series of problems that require you to make a decision. And 50% of all the decisions you will make will be wrong. And you won't know until after. That's just how it works. Get educated about the problem, but most importantly, try not to make the same mistakes twice. You have to get comfortable with being wrong half the time. And then, no matter what happens, you just keep going. Maybe have a whiskey, but just keep going. He believed and told us 1,000 times a day. It could always be worse. Lloyd might have been a bit of a quiet lecturer when it came to serious stuff and hard times, but from those early days squealing tires to his golden years of racing truggies and trophy trucks with Derek, man, did he like to play hard. Helmets were non-negotiables, but most rules were meant to be broken. He was careful to teach us only to break one law at a time. So did his affinity to have a Crown and Coke in the vehicle. Seatbelts also became a non-negotiable. In high school, when we got our licenses, he wasn't ever too worried about speeding or stunting tickets, but had we gotten a seatbelt ticket, we would have lost our keys from old Lloyd, aka Safety Sam. He wasn't a big fan of police, and he was quoted telling us that you can't go to jail for lying to the cops. You don't have to answer questions they don't ask. He always made the best out of a situation. Vanessa got in a trophy truck with him one day in Parker, Arizona. It was the last lap, it was raining, and Lloyd didn't really think they should be out there. The brakes didn't work, gas pedal kept sticking, and at one point a Jeep Speed of all things had to pull them out. But eventually, they came around one corner, and there were 5 naked women standing there shaking their assets. And he thought, well, at least that last lap was worth it. And she took up golf simply because in his older years, she realized they wouldn't be able to ride dirt bikes together. At his favorite course in Arizona last winter, a caddy told her that if she had a hybrid, she should use it. She She quickly responded with, "I hate that club. I can never hit it properly." And after multiple failed attempts, lost balls, and cuss words, Dad very softly looked over at Angie and said, "Angie, it's not the club, it's your bad attitude." And the caddy covered his mouth, and both of them walked in silence to the next hole. Dad had a way of using simple and respectful one-liners to put you in your place. WWLD is an acronym you would often hear us girls say. It stands for What Would Lloyd Do? Now, most of the time, the first thing he would do is pour a whiskey. Crown and Coke to be exact, and heavy on the ice. But then he'd probably stay calm, shrug his shoulders, and remain seemingly unrattled. Life with Grandpa Lloyd was not short on fun either. There was golfing, go-karts, motorbikes, and racing the TRX across the fields. He might have been old, but he could still hang when it came to wild fun and pranks. He was also adamant that the pool had to stay at a warm 93 degrees at all times, just in case a kid wanted to take a dip. Well, there's no sense in having a pool if you can't swim in it, he would say. And no matter what time of day it was, ice cream was on the menu. In even the wildest of times, there was never any real wild laughter or anything from Lloyd. He was fairly precise and a calculated man, always calm, a master at de-escalating a situation. The end of every story revolves around Lloydie being calm and shrugging his shoulders without any sign of grief. In true Lloydie fashion, he lived stoically with Parkinson's disease for a decade without a single complaint. His worst nightmare was to be a burden, so he fought that battle as privately as he possibly could and tried his damnedest to not let it affect his life in any way. In the last few weeks, sitting with another older guy on his 80th birthday, there was a conversation about life and what they would have done differently. And for all the hard work and all the wild play in his 73 years, all that Lloydie could come up with was that he would have bought a brand new trophy truck sooner. He worked hard and lived large and spent big and gambled and built a big farm and loved his family and stressed and had fun. He loved Crown and Coke and to golf and to race and to bike. He was generous and cared about people and seemingly did all the right things. Lloydie got to do all the things that everybody else wished they could do. What a legacy to leave behind.
Hello, I'm Winston, Lloyd's oldest grandchild. I'm 9 years old. Lloyd also has 3 other grandchildren and 1 on the way. Holly is 3, Gus and Bella are 6. Holly gave Papa Lloyd the most gray hairs for sure. But Papa Lloyd always laughed at her crazy stunts. Maybe that's the reason he never stopped giving her ice cream. I don't know. Papa Lloyd always loved Bella's confidence and positive attitude. They also shared the love for bologna and mustard sandwiches. Ew. Gus and Papa Lloyd loved going out in the desert in the TRX and hitting jumps. I liked it too. Papa Lloyd loved the sound of Gus's e-bike. So did Gus. They both had different thoughts for it. Gus thought it was cool, and Papa Lloyd thought it sounded like a bag of tools dragging across the floor. Now let's talk about the tiebreaker. Well, I'm surprised Lana doesn't already have 3. Either way, I'm getting another cousin in December, which is good as long as it doesn't steal ice cream right off my plate like Holly. I liked playing miniature golf with Papa Lloyd. He would always beat me in the first putt, but it was worth a shot. We all liked going to golf on the deck with Papa Lloyd. We all thought Papa Lloyd was old and he couldn't hit the ball very far. Well, we were wrong. Papa Lloyd said, "Watch this," and he hit the ball all the way to the Sproule sign. And he put down his sunglasses and said, We were all shocked. Well, that's the end. Now to be continued by Uncle Buck.
That's a pretty tough act to follow. If anybody wants to get up and grab a drink, that's fine. You're not going to offend me. And I'm sure Lloyd would be okay with it if anybody needs to get up and have a drink. I'm Lloyd Pickard. I'm one of Lloyd's neighbors, and I met Lloyd about 40 years ago, shortly after moving to Pitcher Creek with my wife, Maura, a young daughter, and a line of credit. I can't remember the exact date or occasion when I first met Lloyd, but I do remember the Sproule family making us feel most welcome. They are always the most wonderful hosts, and they have been very supportive of my family and my business. Last Friday, Vanessa and Lana asked me if I would like to say a few words at Lloyd's service, and I agreed, and I'm truly honored to be doing so. Lana said, just go ahead and tell a few funny stories about Lloyd. That's a real kicker. Lloyd was a real fun-loving guy, there's no doubt about that. But there are many of you here in the room today that knew Lloyd better than probably I did. And I think you'd be hard-pressed to have any funny stories regarding Lloyd Sproule. So after a few days of reflection, I decided to take a different approach. And I'm going to give you my personal opinion of Lloyd Sproule. I thought I would try to find one, and only one, adjective to describe the man. So if you close your eyes for a second and try to think of one word to describe Lloyd Sproule, what would it be? Now just take a moment and think about that. What word comes to mind? You don't have to worry, I'm not going to ask anybody. But for me, the word is exemplary. In case you don't have a dictionary or still have a flip phone, exemplary is defined as serving as a desired model or representing the best of its kind. There is no doubt that Lloyd was an exemplary farmer. I'm no farmer by any stretch of the imagination, but even I could tell. He took pride in his farm, the neat and tidy yards, the trimmed grass and ditches, the pruned trees. He obviously enjoyed good equipment, and he made sure that it was cleaned and serviced on a regular basis, daily, cleaned sometimes. He embraced the new technologies and farming techniques that fit into his plan and his systems. You could drive by Lloyd's place at 60 miles an hour, take a glance, and realize, hey, there's a professional farmer who lives there. Lloyd, he loved checking crops and watching them grow. He was always on the hunt for any bug or disease or critter that would affect the crop's yield. as far as I can tell, the crop checking went hand in hand with Lloyd's proactive rather than reactive nature. Everyone wants to be proactive, but Lloyd had it down to a fine art and took it to the next level as far as I was concerned. Excuse me. Not every crop was a bumper crop, but I don't recall Lloyd ever complaining or grumbling too loudly. He accepted what Mother Nature dished out. Just over a month ago was the last time I saw Lloyd. Grant, Jasmine, and I went out with him in his 700 plus horsepower TRX pickup to check crops. It's quite a ride. The crew had just finished combining the first couple of fields. The yields weren't too bad considering the rainfall that we received, but Lloyd was more concerned about the number of grasshoppers and what 2025 may bring. He also took us up to the native prairie that they had rejuvenated on Tower Hill. The knee-high native grasses waving in the wind and not a weed in sight. He was really, really happy on how that project turned out. Exemplary. Even though Lloyd was a successful cattle feeder, he was rather ambivalent about livestock. The livestock were a way to add value to the crops he grew. He wasn't interested that much in average daily gains or feed efficiencies. He liked long-fed cattle that tipped the scales and made the grade. The kind of beef that is served in the high-end steakhouses. That's what he wanted to produce, and he did it pretty consistently. The cattle, they could cause stress and chaos around the outfit at times. And Lloyd, he wasn't keen on that part of it. He always tried to keep stress and chaos to a minimum. A quote of Lloyd's goes something like this: if it wasn't for bull sales and brandings, people wouldn't even run cattle. He did enjoy the social aspect of the cattle business, and he made many true friends over the years of cattle feeding. You got to remember, look, like this is what comes to my mind. Like Lloyd was networking before it was even a thing. In fact, he may come up with the concept like of making connections and building relationships. That was his forte. Lloyd always tried to be considerate of the neighbors, and he strived to be fair in his business dealings and his employer-employee relationships. Of course, there were times that things didn't always go smooth, but he really tried. Lloyd wasn't a pushover by any stretch of the imagination, but nor was he a bully. He would often walk away rather than be confrontational. It wasn't always easy, but he truly tried to do the right thing and live by the golden rule of treating others. He really tried. Deep community roots and a big-time supporter of local businesses and events. Wow, was he ever. The list is long. A true philanthropist and generous to a fault is, could be said. He definitely was a big-time community supporter. That level of community support sometimes came with its own set of tribulations, rumors, and plenty of fake news. But Lloyd never let that stop him from doing what he thought was right. And again, I think that's exemplary. obviously a good businessman. He was good with numbers and mathematically inclined. Those are God-given talents that fit right into farming. Like, couldn't have been better. Frank Jenkins told me a story about Lloyd being quite bored at a high school rodeo finals in Gillette, Wyoming. Now, if any of you have ever been to a high school rodeo, you can imagine how bored Lloyd was. One day, Lloyd noticed a young fellow throwing a scooter into a dumpster. Lloyd cut up to the young fellow's parents to inquire about the scooter, and they assured Lloyd that it was garbage, and that the scooter, and they offered the keys to Lloyd. Lloyd retrieved the scooter, and with only a handful of tools, basic tools, and a can of WD-40, took it apart, cleaned everything up, made a few adjustments, and got the scooter running like new. That's how handy it was. Lloyd then gave the scooter to Frank's son, Riley Jenkins, and I guess Riley was one happy kid. In fact, Riley's still pretty happy. Pretty happy guy. Maybe partly because of the scooter deal, I guess. Lloyd's good friend Bill Jameson relayed this story to me. He said, Bill told me that Lloyd liked to wager a little while playing golf. The wagering game that was favored by Lloyd was called 5-point roll and re-roll. Bill said Lloyd was the only guy that really understood it, and he made the rules. Bill, who is also good with numbers, by the way, said he never really quite understood this wagering thing that Lloyd had going on. Bill said the person needed to have a calculator, a spreadsheet, and have to be a mathematical savant in order to figure it out. But Lloyd could figure it out, no problem, even after a few Crown and Coke back at the clubhouse. Again, exemplary. In many respects, Lloyd was quite private. He held, like Lana mentioned earlier, he held his cards pretty close to his chest. He was humble. He didn't brag. And he could easily read people. He could spot a BSer at a long, long distance. He rarely embarrassed himself, and he tried not to embarrass others. Most people would agree that Lloyd's greatest personal asset was that he was a good listener, an active listener, and that's a rare quality. Lloyd had a way about him that attracted people. He was always more interested in listening to people and talking about himself. He didn't say too much often, but when he did respond, you'd better be listening, because his response was always worth listening to. You never had to look for any hidden answers. He was analytical and straight to the point. No chaff with Lloyd, no chaff. Lloyd was wired different than most of us. He was on the very right-hand side of the bell-shaped curve, in my opinion. He wasn't a saint. He made mistakes, and I'm sure he had some regrets. Like all the rest of us, he had his issues. But I do believe he was exemplary in so many ways. He was a wingman to a lot of people from all walks of life. I am thankful knowing that he was always in my corner if and when I ever needed him. And I feel truly blessed that I've had him as a friend, and I know he will be missed by many, many people. Thank you.
one thing. This is going to be very difficult for me. And on the advice of a good friend, if I have trouble getting my words out, I'm just to look out at the crowd and picture you all sitting there in your underwear. I arrived from Southern Ontario 40 plus years ago. Thanks to my father's crazy idea that Pincher Creek was a great place for a sewing factory. We'll cut down shipping time to the west, don't you know? What he really wanted was an excuse to escape an ever more crowded province, and southern Alberta fit the bill. Mayor Juan Tron sold him an acre of land the day after Elvis died, and I ended up moving here a year and a half later. My first year here, I joined the Pincher Creek No Stars, a ragged collection of characters who didn't mind driving all over southern Alberta on windy, snowy nights to play a bit of basketball and drink a lot of beer and some whiskey. That's how I met Beanie, aka Beanie Shrimp, and through him I met Lloyd. Lloyd had just finished building a big house on his ranch, and Beanie and I became his roommates. If my memory serves me correctly, rent was $250 a month. And that's when a lifelong friendship began. In those days, Sunday afternoon was about the only time Lloyd took off, sort of. With a traveler in our hands, he and I would go on what he called a 150-foot, 30-mile-an-hour crop check. And both my father and Lloyd's mother, Isabel, shared a fundamental belief: if you're not interested, you're not interested. I leaned more towards, if you're bored, you're boring. Well, Lloyd was extremely interested and never, ever bored. If anyone would want me to describe a self-made man, I'd cut right to the chase with 3 words. Lloyd Winston Sproule. Or LW to family and friends. Lloyd was driven to succeed, but at the same time he was always willing and able to engage in conversation. He could stand his ground with the best of them when it came to a run-in but how it came to run a farm, and also he could strike up a conversation with anyone. I saw this firsthand at the Alberta Hotel, in the Great Northern, and concluding at Mastro's in Scottsdale. As I watched this unfold, it became crystal clear to me that Lloyd was showing me how to lead with courage. Throughout his life, Lloyd was a great father, and fortunately for me, a great friend to my family, all 26 of us. As my sisters and brothers, nieces and nephews made the trip to London to visit Dad in Enwalla, no trip was complete without a visit to the Sproules. Lloyd has a very large fan club in Ontario with so many stories to tell. My sister Anne will never forget learning to two-step with Lloyd in this very hall, or the time he begged my niece Mary Heather not to try riding a frisky calf that Garrett brought to the fairgrounds. It ended up not happening, only to have Lana give herself a concussion the next year. Visiting the Sproules was a summer highlight of my daughters, Taylor and Madison, as they were growing up. Taylor is 2 weeks older than Lana, and Angie is 8 weeks older than Madison. Both girls rode their first horse at the Sproules. Lloyd taught Madison how to ride a dirt bike, and over the years, our family traveled together, developing a lifelong friendship built on lasting memories. Watching Vanessa lose in the finals of a chugging contest in Cancun, or Lana putting Chuck Liddell in a headlock in Cabo, or Angie arriving in Florida with a suitcase full of AAA ribeyes was something we always relished, and hanging out with the Sproules was the best. For me, playing golf with Lloyd and his long list of friends will be sorely missed. Playing in member guests at Iron Horse and Whisper Rock is top line of my golf resume. Win or lose didn't matter. It was a day spent with a wonderful friend. This morning, I got steps in for a walk on Tower Road through the heart of Sproule Agro, a farm that Lloyd began in 1977, I believe. There was no wind, the windmills lay still. The sunlight came out and shone
on the pristine golden fields that Lloyd watched being harvested by his children for the last time. A beautiful vista that represented the lifelong work of a formidable gentleman, and Lloyd left the world better than he found it. I'm going to miss Lloyd. Through my tears of sorrow, I will console myself knowing that my dear friend has joined Winston, Isabel, and Donna in heaven, and believe that they are watching down on family and friends that they cherish. In the words of William Yeats, where does a man's glory begin and end? Namely with friends. My glory is to have Lloyd as a friend. And on behalf of his friends here today, we rejoice that you are tucked in with God's loving arms around you. I will never forget you. Thank you.
I received a text the other day from Lana, and she said, can you please sing Amazing Grace at the end? It seems like Lloyd had requested it. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saves someone like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. I was blind, but now I see. It was grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils, and the snares, I have already come. It was grace that brought me safe this far, and grace it will lead me home. You'd like to all stand with me now, and we'll just sing Amazing Grace together if you know it. Let's all stand together. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound, sweet the sound that saves someone like me, that saves someone like me. I once was lost. I once was lost. Now I'm found. I was blind. I was bright shining as the sun. We know the last days to sing His praise, and when we must be gone. One more time, amazing grace. Amazing grace, how sweet it saves someone that saves